Hello, thank you for joining us today for our event, Caregiving Today, a look at this vital role and what it takes. My name is Ingrid, and I am with the network of the National Library of Medicine. Before I introduce our moderator, Gretchen Funk from FiftyForward, I'd like to encourage everyone joining us live to ask questions through the chat. Our team will be monitoring the chat for the duration of the discussion. Please note that your comments may be displayed during the conversation and might also be shared after the event. For chat moderation, we follow the NIH comment guidelines. Closed captioning in English will be available. We would love to hear from you, and our panelists will respond to as many comments and questions as they can. However, due to time constraints, we may not be able to get to all of the questions. If you're not able to stay for the entire discussion, you will find the recording of today's conversation on NNLM's YouTube channel. Your feedback is very important to us. Please complete our online survey through the link shared in the chat for a chance to win one of 5 $20 Amazon gift cards. Your responses will help us improve our approach. Now, I'd like to turn this over to our moderator for today. You may remember her from our program in June, highlighting the intersection of Alzheimer's music therapy and precision medicine. Please allow me to introduce Gretchen Funk, our moderator today. Gretchen Funk is the Chief Program Officer for FiftyForward in Nashville, Tennessee, and the Principal Investigator for FiftyForward All of Us Research Program, National Community Engagement Partnership through the National Institutes of Health. Gretchen is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and the Hunter College Schools of Social Work, City University of New York. Throughout her career, she has been devoted to service and advocacy for the most vulnerable and underrepresented individuals in our community. Thank you, Gretchen. I will now let you take it from here.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Ingrid. Bienvenidos. Welcome to today's conversation about caregiving. As Ingrid mentioned, I am the Chief Program Officer at FiftyForward, and our mission is to support, champion, and enhance life for older adults in Middle Tennessee through provision of engaging services and programs. At FiftyForward, we support caregivers in many ways, including through our FiftyForward Friends Adult Day Services program, which serves older adults in need of support and supervision and provides respite for their caregivers. I am delighted that in collaboration with the network of the National Libraries of Medicine, the National Alliance for Hispanic Health, and the All of Us Research Program, we will spend time with our expert panelists exploring caregiving today. Caregiving affects all of us at some time in our lives. Being a caregiver can be at once the most rewarding and the most challenging role an individual can have. We seek to honor caregivers for their tremendous contributions, recognize the challenges that caregivers face, and highlight some resources which can be helpful. We will also look at how the All of Us Research Program, which aims to advance precision medicine by enrolling 1 million people from diverse backgrounds living in the US to volunteer and share their health data, will be a resource to help researchers better understand the social and health-related impacts of caregiving, especially in diverse populations. Almost 550,000 individuals have enrolled in All of Us so far, with 80% of those individuals coming from communities historically underrepresented in biomedical research. And researchers are already using All of Us data to learn how to improve healthcare for everyone. You can learn more by visiting our website at joinallofus.org/50forward. And now I would like to introduce our esteemed panel. Dr. Luz Maria Garcini is an assistant professor at Rice University and adjunct faculty at the Center for Research to Advance Community Health at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. Broadly, Dr. Garcini's research and community efforts focus on identifying, understanding, and addressing the health needs of historically marginalized communities, particularly in the face of social disadvantage and life adversity. She has received numerous awards and has a track record of publications, presentations, awards received, funding allocated, and media engagement. Welcome, Dr. Garcini. Dr. Eboni Green is a registered nurse and family caregiver. She holds a PhD in human services with a specialization in healthcare administration. Dr. Green has extensive experience focusing on caregivers' health and wellness, with an emphasis on caregiver stress, burnout, and related family conflicts. She has contributed to publications and given presentations that focus on training, assessing, and supporting caregivers. Dr. Green is a published author and has written 3 books focusing on family caregiving: At the Heart of the Matter, Caregiving in the New Millennium, and Reflections from the Soul. Welcome, Dr. Green.
Thank you.
And rounding out our panel is Jane Hamilton. Jane is an entrepreneur, educator, and author. A registered nurse for over 40 years and family caregiver for 20, she is a nationally known speaker and caregiver advocate. Her original model of self-care for caregivers can be found in her book, The Caregiver's Guide to Self-Care, and on her 2 websites. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you.
So now let's begin our conversation. Let me start by mentioning that a number of audience members submitted questions in advance. The topic of caregiving clearly strikes a chord with so many people. The questions submitted touched on the need for resources to help caregivers train for roles that many of us are unprepared for, the reality that caregiving can be very overwhelming and relentless with little or no respite available for primary caregivers, the fact that caregiving causes financial strain and family strife when families disagree about care options or contribute disproportionately to care for family members. The questions ask about self-care techniques and how to help caregivers to realize when their limits are reached and more help is needed. But we also recognize that resources for caregivers can be in short supply, and some of the librarians in the audience ask how libraries can help. We all feel such compassion for caregivers and those for whom they care, and our panelists will offer suggestions based on their personal and professional experience with caregiving. So our first questions are for Dr. Green. Dr. Green, caregiving is often both very rewarding and very stressful. Would you please talk about some of the rewarding aspects that you understand about the caregiving role?
Thank you, Gretchen. I'm excited to talk about how rewarding caregiving can be. I'm going to use a brief example. We cared for my mother-in-law. She ended up having a very bad strain of flu and was in the hospital for some time. And as the family worked together, we were able to bring her home. And she lived with my husband's grandmother. So daughter and mother were living together. And we, as adult siblings and children, made sure that we took care of both of them. To the rewarding part, I remember one night my husband was traveling home from a business trip, and I knew he was going to be really tired. And my mother-in-law called. She needed something that was probably very minor to me, but was extremely important to her. And she called and said, you know, Terrence is coming home soon. Could you ask him to go and pick up this particular item? So I did. But before I did, I kind of hesitated. And it was so funny because she asked me, she said, well, are you scared to ask him? And we laughed so hard. I wasn't afraid to ask him. I knew that he had been traveling, and the last thing he's going to want to do when he's getting off the plane is stop to go pick up something. So our adult daughter went in and did that for her grandmother. So when I think about the rewarding aspects, it's those little moments where you know that it's something very important that you're doing for a loved one that's very important to them. And it may not cost you much. Sometimes it does. But at the same time, there is a great reward of being able to meet an unmet need. And so I always think of that time when she said, are you scared? And I said, no.
I love that. Yeah, it's beautiful how families can become so much closer through caregiving. And I love how you talk about drawing your daughter in, and you gave her an example of how caregiving can be done. That'll pay it forward for, all of us someday. So thank you for sharing that. I love that. And so while there are certainly rewarding experiences like those that you just talked about, conversely, some of our audience members and their questions talk about feeling burned out, isolated, overwhelmed. Would you please share with us what you understand through your personal experiences and your work with caregiver support services and other groups about the variety of stresses that caregivers do experience?
Absolutely. Think about it in this way. If a loved one gets sick and needs our help, we generally will jump in. I even am very intentional about including caregiver in my bio anywhere I go, so that people know that is a priority for my life. But often what happens is when your loved one would need additional assistance, you add that to what you're already doing. Very rarely do we take a step back after we've added in the role of caregiver to then balance that out by taking something out of our busy schedule. So oftentimes what I see is families, and I am guilty of some of these things myself, but oftentimes I see us adding things. We're not necessarily then adding something fun or that nap that you need. We're not necessarily asking the rest of the family to pitch in. We're doing all of these various roles and taking them on and continuing to add those things as our loved one's condition progresses. And then we're not balancing it out by removing things that could be done by someone else. I am a type A personality, and so it does take a lot for me to let go sometimes of those tasks. I'm getting better at it though, because I understand that there's a priority to the relationships that I have and maintaining those relationships via caring for someone, via being there for someone that I love and having those memories. And that to me is more important than filling my schedule and doing more. So I think it's all about being able to verbalize to our employers when we are adding, feeling comfortable with sharing with our friends that, hey, this is a part of my life now, but I still need you to call me, or let's go to lunch or something of that nature, so that I have time to continue to network with family and friends and not feel isolated. And then the other thing I will say is a lot of caregivers don't know where to even start when it comes to seeking support for themselves. And we don't want you to be a martyr. We want you to be really good at what you're doing, but also have a life too.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Green. I think that is so resonant, what you said about how caregiving is an addition to people's lives. There's not, we see statistics about the value of unpaid caregiving. People are putting a dollar amount to that, but not recognizing the impact of that on those caregivers' lives in that way. It's not a transactional thing that's happening. It's a real people. All of these folks are real people managing many things. One of our questions was about folks in that sandwich generation, that we hear about, where you might be raising your own children still, caring for them, then, working as well, because it's your prime, earning years when you're in that age group, and then adding on caregiving potentially for other family members. So that is such a great point, that it's really an addition that people don't really make space for in our society or value enough. Thank you so much. Jane, can you please talk about tools that are available to assist caregivers in identifying the impacts of caregiving on them, so that they can address some of the things that Dr. Green talked about around stress and how their lives are just as important, and how do we identify that impact and then look at what we can do to help?
Exactly. The caregivers' lives are important, not only the care receivers' lives, but the caregivers' lives. And we know from studies that caregiving takes a toll on physical health, on emotional health, on financial health, on relationships in the family and in the workplace. We know that caregiving goes on average 4.5 years, and many people are providing care for 5 years or more. And so by definition, caregiving is a source of chronic stress. And when we are exposed to chronic stress, we need to take action to protect our well-being. And so there are tools that can help us to become aware of the cost that we're experiencing as a result of being a caregiver. And what everyone on this webinar needs to know is that there are 5 tools which we will provide to you after the webinar that are on the list of resources. And I want to tell you what those 5 tools are, and you can go and download them and check yourself out. One is my health at risk as a result of caregiving? And researchers have identified caregiver burden and ways of measuring it to give valid and reliable feedback to caregivers about how their health is being affected. So there is a caregiver burden tool available to you to see the impact on your well-being and health. There's a second tool that I've put up, which is called Why Am I So Stressed? It is a way of looking in depth at what are the things in your life experience as a caregiver that are causing you stress. When we're aware of what those things are, we can respond in a self-protective way with self-care strategies, and I'll talk about those in a minute. A third tool is, what stage of caregiving am I in? Caregiving is a journey, as I said, that lasts over years. We can be preparing for it before our loved ones become ill, but my mom is 80, and so I know she's going to need something someday. And then I can get into it over a period of time, and I'm helping a little, and now I'm really up to my neck in it, and now I'm drowning, and okay, now it's over, and oh my goodness, all of those things are affecting me. And so awareness is a really crucial aspect of caregivers taking care of themselves. We can't care for ourselves if we don't recognize we have a problem. So that's a tool. A fourth tool is, what are my symptoms of caregiver stress? Eboni talked about having sources of stress wear on us. We have symptoms that show up in all of the parts of our lives. And I want everyone listening to think about that we're made up of many parts: physical, emotional, mental, cognitive, our thoughts, mental, social, the interpersonal connections we have with other people, occupational, our work and the work that we do, whether it's as an employee somewhere, or the work we're doing around our home, or the work we're doing as a caregiver. All of those things are occupational, and they can, their symptoms of stress can show up there. And the final area is spiritual. In our spiritual or religious self, the symptoms of my being stressed as a caregiver can show up. So check out that tool to see if you do have some symptoms of stress. And then there's a fifth tool that could be helpful. What kind of healthy self-care practices am I using? And just as those 6 parts of my life reflect the symptoms of stress, in those 6 parts of my life, if I care for myself, I can help manage my stress and protect my health and my well-being, and preserve my capacity to provide quality care. Because if I burn out, we know that burned out caregivers don't do as well providing care.
Thank you, Jane. That is so helpful to know about those tools. I think that caregiving, as we've talked about, people assume it's a role that individuals will take on in their lives. And a few things that you said. One, the planning in advance as much as you can, knowing that we are likely to be involved in caregiving in our lives at some point. So spending some time, and one of our questioners asked about that. She said her father was 80 and she knows at some point he's going to need care, and what can she do to prepare in advance? So that's wonderful to give yourself that gift of preparation. And then secondly, it seems to me that those tools give people some concrete things that they could share with others in their lives that maybe could contribute to care. And I think there are so many interpersonal feelings and relationships that all come into, I don't want to say conflict, but, bump up against each other when you're caregiving. So to have a tool that shows, look, I'm doing fine in this area, but I need you to help me with this piece that, worries me about my ability to stay healthy and care for someone. So thank you so much. I was not aware of lots of those tools, and we're going to see how we can incorporate them in our work with caregivers. So how do you, as a practitioner devoted to honoring and supporting caregivers and the founder of Partners on the Path, how do you help caregivers to build resilience and develop that practice of self-care? The tools are super helpful. What other things do you use with families and caregivers around that?
Well, I think resilience and self-care are sort of intertwined. And I start by asking people to think about what is resilience and get that picture in your mind. And when I think of resilience, I think of an elbow straw that bends without breaking, or in a living example, a forest after a fire, it regenerates, or New York City after 9/11, it came back. And that's what resilience is, and the quality that we need to nurture in caregivers. It's being able to meet adversity and to pull from within myself the resources to struggle well with the challenges that life has dealt me. It's an active process. It's enduring difficult situations. It is adapting to changes. It is being able to sometimes bounce back from adversity, but also sometimes to grow into becoming a more capable person. So I encourage people to think about developing qualities of resilience like optimism. Our attitude, our mindset is crucial, and optimism is the cornerstone of resilience. And I think it is one of the most important self-care practices that caregivers can implement. Not Pollyanna, oh, everything's fine, but looking and saying, good things can come if I keep with this, if I connect with a support network who will help me and be there for me, if I approach things with equanimity, that sense of being calm and centered, and recognizing that some things are beyond my control, and saying, I have this hanging up on my wall. It is what it is. Not fighting what I can't control, accepting what is beyond my control. The Alcoholics Anonymous prayer has that very clearly, and then focusing beyond that to what it is that I can do. I also encourage people to be flexible in terms of using a variety of approaches. Maybe today I need some self-soothing, things that will give me comfort or relaxation or joy in any of those parts of my life: physical, emotional, mental, social, spiritual, occupational. Anything that nurtures me, that self-soothing stuff, bring it in. But there is another approach to self-care that is important to prioritize, and that is active problem solving, where there are issues that would respond or could respond if I took some action. For example, I need information about a referral. Where can I get home health care? Where can we find a second opinion? Having a bubble bath really is not the approach of choice when you need active problem solving. So when I talk with people about self-care, it's the self-soothing actions on a regular basis. It is active problem solving when there is something I can do to change, eliminate, or improve the source of stress. And thirdly, I say avoid stress numbing. Those are the things that I do that kill the pain, that help me forget, that put it on the back shelf, but that don't resolve a problem and sometimes can cause problems. Things like overeating, eating a lot of junk food, drinking too much, going on a shopping spree, just buzzing out on online and not interacting with people. Stress numbing, my mother used to say to me, Jane, everything in moderation. So a little bit of ice cream is fine. A glass of wine is not a problem. But when I overly rely on those things, that's not healthy self-care. So those are my thoughts for caregivers. And I encourage you to care for yourself as you care for others, because you can't help if you can't function.
Right. Thank you so much, Jane. We have audience members saying thank you so much for this helpful information that we have been providing. I really love your analogy to the forest after a fire, in that we want to recognize that there's a change that happens, but look at what are the possibilities in that new forest, because our lives are different when we become caregivers. I really like what Dr. Green said about intentionally putting in her bio that she is a caregiver. Yes. Really recognizing that. I think there is still some around our society lack of recognition of these roles that almost all of us are going to engage in. So thank you so much. So Dr. Garcini, research into the experiences of caregivers and the impact of caregiving is so important to help us understand how best to support caregiving in our society, and also to put data behind it so that people have more of a recognition of all the caregiving that is happening and the needs of caregivers. And as we have heard, caregivers come from many different backgrounds, bringing many different kinds of challenges and family situations. So the All of Us research program really aims to gather health and lifestyle information from 1 million people of diverse backgrounds living in the US. And you have explored the All of Us data set to see how you could use it in your research. What do we need to know about caregivers and caregiving, and what additional data could be collected to provide the most useful, rich, and comprehensive data set for researchers like you so that we can enumerate the needs of caregivers and then get them addressed in our society?
Thank you, Gretchen, for that question and for the opportunity to come and talk a little bit about the importance of research to this audience that we need to know much more about. So, unfortunately, a lot of our communities don't understand what research about and what is the importance of research. And it is essential that we hear the stories. As I was reading some of the questions that have been submitted from our participants, each one of those questions reflects a story. It tells about the challenges that people are living with. And this is sometimes things that researchers, we don't know about. So it is important that we hear these voices. It is important that we learn to listen what works for certain communities. We know that one approach fits all doesn't get us anywhere. So it is important that we found out what are some of those challenges that caregivers from diverse backgrounds face. How can we best address and meet their needs? And all of these voices are essential for that. One of the biggest things that I try to do when I go in the community is try to explain to people why research matters. And some of the things that people don't know is that we need their voices to be able to develop interventions and treatments. If we don't know, we end up having treatments that don't work for everyone. We need their voices to be able to develop resources. Like Jane just gave us a huge list of very valuable resources, But without evidence, without the voices on the community, sometimes those resources are not applicable to the different experiences of different people with different challenges. We need that information to inform best practices. We know that there are certain underrepresented groups that don't receive the quality of healthcare that they need. This kind of research can help us know how can we educate providers to best address the needs of the community. It also is important to determine funding. How can we advocate for the needs of the community? Where do we need to move our efforts? What are the priorities and the needs of these caregivers? And most importantly, it's helpful to inform policy. For instance, insurance policies. If we don't have good, diverse, represented voices in these studies, we're not going to be able who to tailor the resources to. Home health care, is one of the challenging areas that we have with insurance companies. We need to hear the voices of caregivers, and caregivers have been underrepresented in the literature for a long time.
Yeah, that is so excellent. So many excellent examples of the kinds of things we need to understand to advocate for caregivers. So you've talked about why it is important to engage historically marginalized communities in research. So how can we encourage the involvement of individuals like those from the Latino community that might not have felt included in the past? How can we encourage them, help them to carve out that space and understand the importance?
Thank you for saying that. And I think we need to think about two main things. And the first one is we need to repair the damage that has been done. I think a lot of people and researchers don't understand that our communities have been deceived for so long. There's a high level of mistrust. People wonder what is going to happen with this information when I put them in hands of these strangers. Are they going to be sure not to harm us when they use these data? How am I going to be protected? I know particularly for some communities, the legal implications of that. Is it going to contribute to stereotyping, to marginalization, to further discrimination? We have seen this in the African American community. Some participants, caregivers, one of the things that they say is it going to have a repercussion on my insurance benefits? So there is a lot of people that don't understand because no one has told them about the new guidelines, about the new safety and procedures that we have. But the other part of it is not only help people know why and how we can do research safely for the benefit of the community, but also how essential is their voices. And this is what we call an instrumentation approach. I love to use the analogy of an orchestra. It cannot play a fine tune if some of the instruments are missing in the opera. So I think it is important for us that know that every voice counts. And in the rhetoric that we've been hearing lately about health equity and social justice, this is a time to step forward for our communities to have a voice and a representation. And the all of us effort is aimed to that. So I invite community partners. For instance, we have libraries here. Libraries are safe spaces for people. They're trusted places where people go and build community. Researchers, we need to learn how to collaborate with these agencies, with these organizations, with a lot of the partners and the people that are community trust so that we can move forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garcini, for bringing to light some of those historical challenges that we have to really work intentionally to overcome. And I really appreciate your strategies and your ways of addressing those. I also think, and I'm interested in what all the panelists think about this, for caregivers, additionally, there are all the challenges that could get in the way of them participating in all of us. We have one of our audience members said, I work full time. I don't have enough time in a day to make sure my loved one is okay while raising two young adults just starting college and being a master's student herself. Something that I think about is that the All of Us program is an online platform. So most of the activities you can do from home at whatever time. It does mean, finding that 25th hour in the day. I don't mean that, for exactly that, but I know that that's what it can feel like for caregivers. Dr. Green and Jane, and what do you think about how we can encourage caregivers to participate in the All of Us research program? Because as Dr. Garcini was saying, without their data, we just will not understand what are some possible solutions or societal ways that we can address caregiving. Any ideas about how do people understand that there is an importance to carving out that time, which is so hard for them to have? I don't know.
Yes, I think
Dr.
one of the.
Green? Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I think one of the ways that Dr. Garcini mentioned that is most powerful is being able to associate the research that we're conducting to actual things that can be improved within your community. So there is always that lack of trust. I won't say there always, but there has been a history of lack of trust. I think some of us are in our communities and we can help to bridge that gap so that individuals are understanding that the old way of doing things is not the new way that we're doing them now. And that many of the researchers that you are connecting with are possibly individuals who are from underrepresented communities, and that their whole idea and goal is to connect both the research and practice so that we can improve the lives of caregivers within communities.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Great idea. And just one thought that occurred to me is that to connect up with some of the nonprofit organizations that are leaders in the space, in the caregiver space, the Rosalind Carter Institute, the National Alliance for Caregiving, the Caregiver Action Network, the Family Caregiver Alliance are four big nationally known organizations. The Veterans Administration has a huge caregiver support program, and perhaps partnering with them to send messages to those in their community might help to get some information out as well.
Great suggestions. Thank you. And we are nearing the end of our time. One more question for all of our terrific panelists. We all have caregivers in our lives. What is one practical piece of advice that you could offer, big or small, about how those of us in the audience could support a caregiver that we know?
I can go ahead and start. And there's so many that flood, but I think what is important in caregiving is to learn to set priorities, boundaries, and limits, to learn how can they find that space for themselves. Jane talked to us about self-care. How can you schedule that into your everyday life? So there's going to be that time that is just for you. And then we know that there's caregiving implies 1,000 stressors. What are some of those 3 things for one day that you can focus just for today, putting themselves as a priority, whether it's having a full meal, sit down to have that meal for yourself, maybe having 5 minutes to go walk around the block, maybe setting around a few time to just read something that they enjoy, but really setting boundaries and limits with other people too, telling them today is just enough. And learning how to say no. It kind of gets sensitive, especially in certain cultures. I'm Latina, so saying no is not very well taken. But learning to say no with kindness, sometimes it can get a long way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to build on what Luz had to say, and it's about self-care. I think the gift to a caregiver would be to encourage them to get past the guilt of taking time out to care for themselves, and to emphasize that self-care is not selfish, but that it is a health promotion strategy. It protects your health and your well-being. So related to that, I have two things to say. One, tell the caregiver that it's like dental care. You do a little toothbrushing every day. It's mindless. It takes a minute. You do it in the morning, you do it at night, you do it every day over time, and you have dental health as a result of it. Small things are high in self-care, are high leverage in terms of their ability to protect your health and well-being. And in addition to the dental care image, 3 words: admit, permit, and commit. Admit that there are stressors in your life that will take a toll if you don't do something to care for yourself. Permit yourself to carve out some time, like Luz was saying. Even little moments of 5 minutes around the block ultimately will add up over time. So admit the need, permit yourself to do it. It's not something you should be guilty about, but it is a health promotion strategy, and then commit to it. Say, I am going to put myself on my to-do list today and to put myself on my to-do list every single day. Something.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Green, do you want to round us out with some advice?
I certainly do. I think that one of the things we often miss when we become caregivers is that it is often in an emergency type of situation. And so many of us don't receive training. We're getting maybe discharge instructions, and we're going to be expected to remember those, which is under high stress. So I say, treat yourself to training. Don't be afraid to say, hey, what you just shared with me, that's totally over my head. I have no idea what you're talking about. I need you to clarify that for me. And to also remember what both Luz and Jane said, that when we say in caregiving, take care, we really, really mean it. We really want you to be empowered to do the things that you need to do to be successful as a caregiver.
Excellent. I found myself taking a deep breath while you were speaking, Dr. Green, because that is so true and so centering. So thank you all so much. So I'd like to thank all 3 of you. I have so enjoyed getting to know you, have taken so many notes, and I am really looking forward to all the digging into all the resources that I know we will be sharing with all of the audience who have attended our session. And thank you to the audience, especially those of you who are caregivers. We really have an understanding of how much it means that you carved out time to spend with us, to learn more about caregiving today. And so to learn more about the All of Us research program and how the inclusion of diversity can help improve health for all of us. Also, please visit our website at www.joinallofus.org/50forward, where you can learn how to become 1 in a million with us and to improve the lives of all of us and all of us caregivers. And now we'll have just a few words from Ingrid as we end our conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Gretchen, Eboni, Luz, and Jane, for joining us today. To our audience members, we want to thank you so much for being here. We hope this discussion will help jumpstart your interest in learning more about how you can help change the future of health by participating in research programs like All of Us. November is National Family Caregivers Month. Acknowledging that caregiving is an often overlooked but critical public health issue that affects many people's quality of life, the NNLM Reading Club explored this matter in their monthly release. You can find information on featured books, free downloadable book club discussion guides, customizable promotional materials, and more curated resources around caregiving. We invite you to visit the website linked in the chat. All registered participants will receive an email with a link to download a resource guide for caregivers, which also includes access to the reading club materials. This program was made possible in partnership with the National Library of Medicine, NLM, the Network of the National Library of Medicine, NNLM, 50Forward, and the National Alliance for Hispanic Health, NAHH. We want to thank the library partners and community organizations from around the United States for promoting this event to their community members. And before you go, a quick reminder about our survey. We really welcome your feedback on this program through our online survey. A link is available in the chat. Your responses will help us continually improve our programming. Thank you.